this lecture, we'll just be coding through all the concept we previously discussed in the last lecture. So let's go to the editor and get started. Okay, here I am at the editor. The first thing I am going to do is scene into new folder. Go to new folder. I just made folder called Django level 3, and then I'm going to actually create the project. So I will call my Django dash admin command line tool. We'll say start the project, and we can just call this project whatever we want. I will call it something like basic forms, and this should start off the project, and after that we can start off the application. So I will see into the cd into the top level basic forms and then called Django admin start app to start application, and we can call this just basic app, choosing simple names here. And now if I expand this, I see the folders and files that I was looking for. And let's actually create our templates folder that goes under the top level projects folder. Create a new folder called it templates, and then inside of this I want to create another folder that matches the basic app name. And this is where the applications HTML templates HTML templates are going to go, and then we'll create a new file here called it index.html, and we'll create another file, and this one we can call something like form underscore page.html. So I understand this index.html, that's just going to be the home page. I will type html and we'll give it to the title home. So heading 1, welcome to the home page. This is the heading. Save that. And then the form page, that's where we are actually going to be using template tagging and doing a lot more. So we'll just leave it with the title forms for now, but we'll do a lot more at this page later. So what we need to do is actually edit our settings file so it knows where the templates are and that we have an application that we just made. So we'll open up setting, and then let's set up the template directory. So that's going to be template underscore dir, and we'll set that equal to os.path.join, and I want to join the base directory with templates, so I will name it templates. And then what I want to do is scroll down to where we have installed apps. Make sure I include the app I just made, which is basic app, and then continue to templates and pass in that templates directory I just made. There we go. So I will say this. So now my settings are ready to go, and now we can get started with actually creating the forms, which means instead of my basic app going to right click, right, create a new file called it forms.py, that is Python file, hit enter, and then it's going to look very similar to building up a model. So you'll say from Django imports forms. Previously we had done import models, then we will create a class. I will call this just a very basic form name class, and then we'll just form stock from again forms.form. We basically did models last time, so hopefully this feels really similar, just using the same paradigm, and then we'll say name, create a couple of fields. So now instead of making database fields, we are making essentially what our form fields, those text inputs, text areas, etc. So this will be a character field for the actual name. Also have this person provide a email, okay, after name. In the forms we'll say forms, do let's say an email field, and then we can say let's have a text area field. Okay, so the way you do that is just say forms pass in a character field, and inside of this you can specify a particular widget, and you can check out the documentation for a list of all the widgets available. But essentially what you do is just call forms and then pass in the widget method or widget attribute that corresponds to the actual type you would specify in the HTML. So remember, we were making forms of HTML. We would specify odds a type text area input here in below that text area. So we are just specifying it as a widget inside of this character field, and you can kind of see how this would match up later on when we connect this to a model. Right now we are just using a very basic form. Later on we will see how to use model forms. That's really all we need to do here for the forms that py python file. What we can do now is set up the views that we actually return these pages correctly. So we will say from, and I can just say from dot import forms, or I could also say from basic app import forms. It's basically the same. And let's create an index view. Just get that out of the way. That's going to be simple request, and we'll return render function with the request, and let's pass it in the actual file we want to do. So that goes under template, which is going to then basic app index that HTML. Okay, and we'll start off with a very basic view before we actually check for the post. So the most basic view you can get for reform looks something like this. So whatever you form name view you want, it takes in a request, and then inside of this I'm going to say the form is equal to, and I imported forms dot, and whatever the actual class you call that form. Here it's telling me you called it from name, so that's fine. So we'll make an instance of that form name class here, and I'm going to return with the render function pass and request like we always do. Pass in the page I want to show, and in this case I want to say basic, and we call that page from underscore page dot html, and then finally the context dictionary will give it the key form, and we will pass in that actual form object. And again, you can be flexible, whatever you want to call these things. Maybe you don't like that I'm using the word form so much, or basic so much. So it's really up to you, whatever you want to call these. Now that we have these view set up, we want to make sure that we actually point URLs in a right way. So I will come to the project urls.py file, and we could also have URLs that .py file point to the application's URLs and do it that way. Remember, it was including this other URL configuration and keeping things pretty simple. So let's add in a call here. Well, first we actually need to import from our application. We'll say from basic app import views. Okay, that way I can call them. We'll use a function method here. Remember, that's this very first one where we just use this syntax. So come down and then say URLs, and I am going to specify for the home page that just caret symbol dollar sign using regular expression, and say view dot index, and we'll give it the name index. So this is the old way of creating URL, but for the new latest Django you need to change it into the path method. So can you please do the chat GPT for that, and it will be helpful. And then I like always having the first to do the home page, first you homepage URL, and then admin site URL, and then everything else being your actual pages after that. So we'll say regular expression caret symbol, and let's have the extension for this. So be something like that. So it's really up to you, whatever you want to call it. This basically just says, okay, if you go to your URL slash from page and anything after that, it's going to make you to the views of dot and then the view, in this case we called it form underscore name underscore view, and we'll give it to the same. Alright, so that should be all we need for the URL patterns, and you need to change it into the new patterns, that is path method. And now let's actually go with the templates and show up how to use the template tagging to actually inject that form. Our index page looks pretty simple. We'll add one more thing, that say go to slash form page to fill out the forms. Let's double check that that was the actual URL I gave. Okay, slash form page to fill out the forms. Yes, it was. And then on the form page, we are going to let's put this all in a division that we can use later. I will give it the container class because I have already included the bootstrap using the that link. I don't have an imported bootstrap yet, but that's okay. We'll include that. We'll show that when we kind of want to improve the site, but let's keep everything super basic. And I'm going to just say from form here again. I'm not even checking if there is a form. I'm just saying form. Let's save that and see if we actually can get everything to work. Hopefully we don't forget anything, but I'm going to say Python manage.py run server. So I am running the server now. I'm completing all the things, and let's see our application is running without error or not. Okay, so I am not going to copy this, bring it over my browser, means copying and opening into the browser. This because our application runs successfully. So it looks like we got the home page working out. We see go to form page to fill out the form. Let's see if that also works. So for that I need to change the URLs, put a form page, and here we can see this actual page. We have same email and text. It looks super ugly, and we see if I type something in, there is not even a submit button here, so it's pretty blending. But we can see that we are actually starting to get the very basics of the form in Django. Here is that text area widget. So great, we have started and we have done. Now let's add some stuff to actually improve this. The most and the most of it is going to happen on the form page, that HTML and the actual forms.py file. And first thing we want to do is let's just actually make this look good, and since we are going to looking at it a quite a little, I will say here in the head of my HTML files I will paste in the link to bootstrap to giving just a nice look. So going to use bootstrap there for now and keep things simple, and we will also do it in the next HTML. Save that, and let's put all the inside of the container class, and let's put that inside of a jumbotron. So jumbotron is also a bootstrap class. Just to make the homepage look a little nicer, we'll grab these two headings and then put them inside these divs. Save that. Okay. And then for the form page, we have to add in quite a bit. So we have that container class, so that works out for us. But notice we actually don't even have any form tags and those form tags. So the basic form HTML tags, those are not made for you when you call form here. So what you need to do is actually have those provided. That way you can say what you want to do. Although we would not worry about class or actions for now, you can worry about class when you want to style this a little more with bootstrap. But for now, the div containers should be enough. Let's add in a heading here that says fill out the form, and save that. And then I am going to request the forms as underscore p, and that's going to request each of those form visits to be instead of paragraph tag. That way they don't go from left to right, but instead we get that actual line break, and they go from top to bottom. And then we also need inside of these form tags to ask for the input. And also as a quick note, I have the method right now being post inside of the form lowercase or capital, either way. So it should work. So we'll capitalize it just so it's really clear there, and I want the input to be type. Let's make it submit, and we don't really have to give it a name for now. Okay, and we could give it a class if we wanted to look a little nicer. You can say button and then btn primary, one of these bootstrap classes, and let's give it to a value. So we actually see something inside the button and we'll hit save. So now I'm going to grab that URL again, see what it looks like, bringing that in. Uh, okay, obviously the homepage looks a lot nicer with that Jumbotron. And then let's go to the form page, see that that ends up looking like. And this looks very nicer with the bootstrap. Fill out the form and we can see stuff is looking good. But notice if I hit submit, well, let's actually fix that email gmail.com. I hit submit and I am getting an error. CSRF verification field request aborted here. And so remember, as I mentioned in the previous lecture, we need to have that tag, CSRF tag there in order to have the security that we need to make sure our users are safe from submitting their form or submitting data to some other websites. So as I mentioned, a lot of these forms are going to break if you don't have that tag, which is a good thing. It keeps you a good safe programmer. So let's add in that token. We'll save it and you can add it above or below. The form should work the same, and I am going to refresh the page now. Make sure it's working. And to do this, I'm actually probably going to need to restart the server. So we'll say python manage.py run server, and then let's come back to this again. And now when I come to the page, and you have to not just refresh, you have to go back to it here, and let's see if I type some stuff out here, we will actually try accepting something. So if I hit submit, notice that over here on the bottom I have had a bunch of get calls, but now I get a post here. So it's actually accepting the information. So now let's show you how you can do stuff with the data. So we'll edit our view. Coming back to the views.py, we have our very basic form view. It it does not really do anything though when I actually post the data. So as we were mentioning in the previous lecture, if you just have this view and this form, you have a good looking form, you have the token, so it's secure, but you are not doing anything with that data once it gets posted to you. So we are going to do is come back to previews and actually show you a very simple example of something you could do it with it. So you are not going to just print out the data into the console, but this will show you idea of you can actually grab that data. Later on we'll show you much more complicated things you can do with the data. Right now so we'll keep things simple and just print out whatever the person put that forms directly into the console. And what I will do, start off is having the, let me collapse the tree so we get a little more room here. And then the first thing I want to do is check if the request, then call the method attribute is equal to post. Okay, meaning someone actually hit submit and posted something back. I'm going to need to pass in that request. So now I will say form is equal to forms, that form name, and then pass in that request stop post, full stop post. Okay, and depending on that plugins you have, if you downloaded some Django plugins, you will have a lot more help in syntax highlighting area. So keep that in mind, and then we will say the form, if the form and it has a method called is valid, which is essentially a boolean check to see if the form is actually valid or not. And we'll talk a lot more about custom validation checks later on. Right now, this should automatically return. It's valid as long as it works with the HTML inputs like the at the rate symbol and email input. So again, if the form is valid and the request method is post, I can do something here. So this is where you do something code will work. Okay. And so let's show you a very simple thing you can do with it, and let's just grab the data and print it out. Probably would never actually do this, but just to show that it works. So we'll say validation, okay, and success. So he successfully validated the data from the post, and then I will show you how to access the data. So you grab your form object and then off that. One way to do it is by grabbing dot cleaned u underscore data and then those actual fields that you had in your form. So if you go to forms that py, remember we had these object class object attributes, the name, email and text coming back here. That's what you pass in as the key. So I can pass in name here. And then I can print this out directly into the console, and to show a little bit of nicer formatting. Okay, so we don't just print that out, but I will say name space, and then we are going to do this again for the other two fields. So I will do a paste here, and I am going to say email, and then I am going to say here text. And if this is very ever going too fast for you, you can always reference the notes and you can reference the presentation, the slides. That is for the kind of walkthrough of the steps we are going here. And then we have email and then whatever text happen to put in the text area. Okay, so we'll save that. The render stays the same. And now let's quit the server and run it again. We should not have to do this, but just to make sure that everything got posted as a change and bring in our browser. So here it is at the home page, this, and that we are going to do is to go to the slash form page, and we will fill out the form, and we'll say my name is Josh, my name and email is hello@gmail.com, and then something random text. So if I hit submit, now we see it here printed out in the console in the down. Joe's emails, hello, and text, etc. And that is the very basics of a Django form. Hopefully, you can see how powerful Django is just with the most basic form. You can grab data that the user inputted and easily work with it. And you have the advantage of just having to put essentially two very small template tags in the form, a lot easier than what we have seen in the past. If you have any question, feel free, you can ask me. And so this is all